finlands.com. And as many of you may know, I just got back from one of my trips to Europe, and I spent a lot of time in Iceland and in Finland, two of my favorite countries, and two of the countries of the world, even though they're in the EU, that still have amazing nature and organic food and open wide spaces, which you really don't find in too many other locations. I started my trip here in Iceland, and I did a lot of work in the Reykjavik area, but while I was there were over 500 earthquakes coming from a volcano underneath an ice field just to the south of the Reykjavik area, closer to Keflavik, where the international airport is located. And as many of you know, last year in the southern and the eastern part of Iceland, there were volcanic eruptions in the Eyjafjallajökull volcano. And there's even talk now of the Hekla and Katla volcanoes that may go off, which if that happens, that will interrupt air travel and weather for quite a long time to come. In Iceland, Hekla and Katla are called the evil sisters because they're so destructive when they erupt. Fortunately, this volcano that's starting to erupt in the southern part of Iceland in the Reykjanes Peninsula is more like the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii, kind of oozes out, doesn't really explode too much into the atmosphere, but you know, still it is a volcano and we have to keep an eye on it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later on in this podcast of what it will do to you mentally and physically. And I also wanted to mention in Finland, you can see how close it is to the Russian border. And at one time, the Russians, when they were part of the Soviet Union, actually wanted to occupy Finland and make it one of their Soviet republics. Well, what happened was in World War II in 1942, what they call the Winter War happened, where the Russians, even though they were fighting the Germans, took their time to occupy and keep 1/3 of Finland. Finland used to go all the way to the Barents Sea, and now it is completely landlocked in the north. And all of this area here, west of St. Petersburg and into the Kola Peninsula, in the area that is called Karelia, this used to be part of Finland and now has been taken by the Russians. And when I was on Finnish TV, I, off camera, spoke to the Minister of Mental Health, who was also a member of the EU Council for 8 years. And she told me that the only reason Finland joined the EU was to protect themselves from a possible Russian invasion. Even now, they're still worried about the Russians. And so they felt belonging to the EU, if anything were to happen, the other EU nations would come to their defense. And plus, it would be a deterrent for the Russians to even attempt an invasion. But what I found very interesting is that Finland is actually kind of being invaded now, because literally hundreds of thousands of Russians have moved into Finland and are living in the eastern and southern part of Finland. So really, it's just a matter of time before they gain political power and elect people into the Finnish parliament, and before you know it, it'll become a Soviet republic without a war taking place. And I kind of mentioned that to the people at the TV show and to the minister, and she said, "This is shocking news," but she was quite interested and even wanted me to attend one of her meetings, which I had no time to do, unfortunately, then. Another interesting thing about Finland, it's kind of a history lesson. It's really only been independent since 1917. Before that, for centuries, it was owned and occupied by Sweden, even by the Vikings. And then after that, it kind of came under Russian control for a century and then became independent. What we also see happening with Finland is that most of the area is empty. Really can't grow very much, not much of a growing season. And Finland isn't really its name. It was a name given by one of the popes back in the 1300s because it was so far away and so distant, nobody wanted to go there. So in Latin, they called it Finland. Finland, which means the end. It's the end of the world. So that's where it got its name, the end of the world. But the Finnish people call themselves Suomi, S-U-O-M-I, Suomi, and their language is most closely associated with ancient Sumerian. So when you think about it, the name Suomi sounds like Sumer, and if you look on the map, here's Finland, and Sumer was all the way down here. The only other country whose language is closely associated with Sumerian is the Hungarians. And Hungary, as you can see, is also pretty far removed from Finland and Sumer. So how did this happen? Well, very likely when the Sumerians moved and became the Mesopotamians and Babylonians and moved up here into the Caucasus Mountains and then became the Khazars, that then spread west and southwest, especially with the Mongol hordes and the Huns as they moved westward into Europe and occupied Europe for so many decades and centuries. So that's a little history lesson of Finland and Europe. And even today, the dynamics are such that there are problems between the peoples. Quite honestly, when you go to Europe, even though most of these countries are part of the EU, and even Iceland now is being pulled into the EU against their will, most of these countries do not like each other. The Germans still hate the French, the Finnish don't like the Russians, the Icelandics don't like the Norwegians, and so on and so on. So it makes you wonder about an EU, a European Union. It's really a name only. It's an economic and political enforcement. It's really not a natural outgrowth of those people and their cultural identities. Quite honestly, they're none of them happy with it. So it makes me think, when that happens here to the North American Union, what will that do as far as Americans and Canadians and Mexicans and even including Central America and possibly South America eventually? How will that affect the identities of the people and how they feel towards each other? And Europe is a very good example of that. Plus, many of the countries are economically collapsing, like Ireland, Portugal, Greece, and many of the others. So very interesting information. One other thing is, as far as weather is concerned, and we've heard all winter long how the eastern part of Greenland and this part of Canada, the northern part, had the warmest winter ever. Well, I will tell you, as of March 2011, I flew over all of this, and Labrador, Newfoundland, Greenland, all of this covered in ice and snow. No open water, all the rivers and lakes are frozen solid, so I don't know what kind of warm winter they had. It was pretty cold as of March 2011. And so on that note, I would like to change gears a little bit. Just one other thing. In Iceland, whaling is still legal. You can eat whale steak in the restaurants. They say there are so many whales around Iceland, it's actually destroying their fish industry, and so they're encouraging whalers to get whales out of the ocean and kill them so that they can have their fish for the fishing industry. So I think that was also quite interesting. The only war Iceland ever had in 1200 years was with Britain over fishing, and it wasn't really a war because Iceland doesn't have an army or a navy or an air force. They have no military whatsoever. They were attacking the British fishing fleets for coming too close, and they would just go behind them and cut their nets. So the only war Iceland ever had was with the fishermen of England, and the weapons were scissors to cut the nets. So interesting about Iceland, and I'm going to get back to some things later on, but now let's go to some physical health issues. Since I've discussed so much about volcanic activity on the Earth, we have to remember that the Earth is actually a reflection of the beings living on it. So if there is increased seismic and volcanic activity, what does that mean about the mind patterns and the emotional states of the people living on this planet? If you're a volcano person, as I refer to people living near volcanoes, what kind of a personality do you have? One that perhaps you stuff your emotions, keeping it in, stuffing until finally it just explodes out and you can't even control it. And what happens, when you're a volcano person and you explode? It's not a pretty sight for the people living with you or around you or having to deal with you. What does it do to your body? Well, it certainly is going to cause blood pressure issues, may cause plaque and cholesterol to build up in the body, make the muscles tighten around your bones, cause your vertebrae to go out of alignment, aches and pains all over. I'm sure that many of you out there have been experiencing this for quite a while. In fact, in my work, I hear from people all the time about their physical issues, and there's a definite increase in the pains in the neck, back, legs, blood pressure issues coming up, issues with the heart. All of this because you're stuffing down the emotions and not releasing them in a proper manner. And so, what should we do? Physically, let's go to that first, when we are dealing with this kind of situation. And remember, if we fix the physical self, and the mental self, of course, the emotional self, and we project that out into the world is going to reflect in a much more healthy way. So by helping ourselves and fixing our own body, minds, and emotions, we are going to stop earthquakes and volcanoes and wars from happening all over the planet. So really, it's up to each one of us. I do suggest to people out there to do very slow stretching exercises so that they release the tension in their back and their neck. I always like the one where you bring your shoulders and elbows back towards each other and then bring the chin to the collarbone and hold a couple of seconds. Then slowly release to normal position. That will loosen the trapezius muscles so that the upper back isn't pulled so tightly. And it will also stretch the vertebrae in the neck so that the discs can go back into position. And you can do that as often in the day as you feel comfortable. Of course, don't do that when you're driving or having to focus. But if you're sitting at your computer all day or working at your desk, certainly do that stretching exercise. In the evening, it's a good idea to take cool baths and showers, especially with sea salt. That will relax the body, remove the tension and the heat that you feel inside of you. It's good in a sea salt bath to do deep and slow breathing exercises. Slowly in through the nostrils, holding a couple of seconds, and slowly blowing out through the mouth. And if you did this for a few minutes, it will definitely oxygenate the body, release the tension, and especially if you do this in bed before you go to sleep, it will put you into a very good, peaceful sleep, particularly if you do it in conjunction with dolphin frequency work. I do also recommend that you meditate at least 15 minutes every day. The time of day doesn't really matter, it's whenever convenient for you, because the meditative state will relax the body, defocus from issues that are concerning you, take away that tension and stress. And of course, it's always a good idea to flush the body with ice blue when you feel upset or angry or have high blood pressure or even high blood sugar. The ice blue will lower things down, remove tension and stress, reduce swelling and pain in the body. Those of you who have my Healer's Handbook, if you go into the healing techniques and look up the dial exercise, D-I-A-L, you will be able to then plug in blood pressure, blood sugar, and then turn the dial to a normal setting, press the set button, put it in brown, and that has been shown to reduce blood pressure significantly and any other illness that needs to be normalized in the body. Digestive issues may arise from all the stuffed tension and stress that people put in. I would definitely make sure you eat and drink as organically as possible. Take digestive enzymes, and of course, drink a lot of distilled water, because that will pull the toxins and even the ELF and microwave out of the body. If you find it difficult to relax and even to sleep at night, instead of taking medications, I find it very equal and less invasive and less toxic if you get the herbal kava kava, St. John's wort, and valerian root. Start out with a low dose, 1 or 2 capsules, maybe before bedtime, half hour or so before. That will relax you. I also find if it's a really stressful, intense time period for you, taking a combination of valerian root, kava kava, and St. John's wort in the morning, at breakfast time, will also keep you calm and centered during the rest of the day. Kind of takes the edge off of that. I also recommend deep tissue massage as frequently as you can afford it or stand it, because that really does get the knots out, and it can connect to some emotional issues in the body where they're centered, so that you release it in a proper manner instead of exploding out like a volcano or an earthquake. And that leads me then to the mental health portion of what I wanted to tell you. If you stuff your emotions or you don't release the negativity at all, you are contributing again to the tension and stress on the earth, including the geological, seismic, volcanic activities. Like I mentioned earlier, volcano people stuff and stuff until it explodes, and earthquake people need a shakeup in their lives. If you look at where people live where there's earthquakes frequently, those are the kind of people, if you look at their personalities and study it, they need a shakeup in their life. They're too stagnant in what they're doing, or they may be too focused in one thing and not looking at another, and they need to be shaken up, literally, from the ground up, so that they can change direction and take the proper precautions for themselves in their lives. Again, the three-pronged work that I suggest is the golden altar release work, the growing up the child within, and oversoul communication, and I'll even throw in deprogramming techniques. Those four are the cornerstones of the de-stressing of your life, and all of this work can be found in Hyperspace Helper book, and of course True Reality of Sexuality. So I do recommend that you study all of those, and even perhaps watch the DVDs on Hyperspace Basics and Oversoul Basics. One other thing which I mentioned in my last podcast is to use the brown merger 24/7. The attacks of ELF, the triggers, the activations are relentless now. If you look around, so many people literally lost their minds. People have totally altered personalities. Your friends, your family, the people you work with, people you see outside in the streets, supermarkets, stores, they have literally lost their minds, and it's getting worse as the ELF is intensified, the microwave pulses are intensified. People are being thrown into back altars. The altars in your matrix that were never physical, never took the body, are now coming forward, so that people don't even recognize themselves. And I'm sure that when they're triggered, they don't know what's going on. And it takes the people around them to take notice and remind them to do their brown merger work. It's very important. Also, using a block when you're out there in the world, surrounding yourself in and around with a violet color, and then putting brown around it to seal it in, and as a ground as an anchor. Also, if you are dealing with people who you can see are triggered or activated and out of their minds, you could put a big brown wall, visualize that, between you and that person to block the energy between, and you can even put a layer of violet after the brown. So hopefully all of these things will help you if you do it. We're in the state now of the world where all of these things are right in your face, and there's no time to fool around or test or even practice. It's time now to just do the work. As Yoda said in Star Wars, there is no try. There's either do or don't do. And that's what we're in right now. Do or don't do. We must do something, because the world is literally falling apart in front of us. On that note, I would like to start with the first dream analysis in this particular podcast. And as I mentioned last time, my goal is eventually to have an entire podcast just for dream analysis, because people have shown a great interest in this. And so this dream that this person sent in is rather long, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but rather I'm going to make a synopsis of it. And in fact, this person, a female, sent in one long dream, but when I reviewed it, to me, it was actually 2 or 3 different dreams, because in there she says that the dream changed. And when you see that and say the dream changed, he went into another dream. The dream is a dream, and it changes when it's another scenario. And so let me quickly just state this particular dream, and I'm going to paraphrase here because it's very long. In it, she says she was surfing down a straight line, and there was a great colored river in between mountains. The river was like a water slide. There were silver flecks that hit her in the head and lodged deep into the side of her head and forehead. She pulled out these silver flecks, and they left holes in her head that were pretty deep and wide. She filled the holes with gauze and put tape over them, and she had a feeling that she'd be bleeding for the rest of her life, even though in the dream the hole or injury didn't bleed a lot, and she did not see what color it was, if it was red or clear. And then she went into her vacation home where her father and her sister had been, and she told them what happened. And her sister was about to compete in a rowing meet, and the father was about to do something else, and he decided to have this person wait until the sister's meet was over before he could take her to the doctor to check these holes in her head. So then she lay down to rest, and that's when the dream changed or ended. And this is a very interesting dream, and it is an oversoul dream. I always make distinctions between oversoul and programming, but this is about her life, and basically what it's saying is she's very confused in her life, and she's losing her happiness and feeling very hurt about things that are going on around her, and every day takes a precedence, everyday life takes a precedence over her spiritual life. And what that's telling her is she needs to stop what she's doing and take care of the spiritual self, because she's hurting her physical self by not taking care of the spiritual. And literally, she's walking around like a hole in her head. She's not doing what she's supposed to be doing. I'm sure she's forgetting things. She's confused. People aren't helping her. She needs to take care of herself. And when we do our next podcast in April, I'll continue with another portion of this dream, and hopefully other people will send in other interesting dreams. I would like to conclude this podcast by giving you some positive information, and always getting accused of being fear-monger and saying things that are happening. I'm reporting what's happening in the world. If the world was love, light, and peace, that's what I'd tell you about, and it wouldn't be very much news. So unfortunately, we live on a planet where these things are happening. These things that are not pleasant, these things that are not very happy. People are dying, people are getting sick. There's war, there's activations and programming, there are aliens going to attack the planet. There's all these things going on. The earth itself is crumbling and shaking. So yes, I have to tell you about these things, because you're not going to hide in the sand. You can hide for just so long, and then sooner or later it's going to knock on your front door, and if you weren't prepared for it, you won't know how to react or what to do for yourself. And so on that note, I have a couple of, actually 3 affirmations that I'd like to share with you, because when you deprogram, when you do your release work, you're kind of getting these negative thoughts, these negative patterns out of your head. You need to replace them with something that's beneficial and positive for you. So this is to help settle and balance the mind in the world that is so erratic at the moment. So first affirmation is, I am now calm and peaceful at all times. I am now calm and peaceful at all times. Write that down where you can see it. You can even write it on a piece of paper and tape that paper with the words facing a jar of distilled water, and the frequency of this affirmation will go into the distilled water, and then you can actually drink the affirmation to enhance it within you. Or you can put it under your pillow, make it into a template. This is a very good one. I am now calm and peaceful at all times. Next affirmation. I have only good experiences from now on. I have only good experiences from now on. Remember, affirmations need to be simple, positive, personal, and in the now, in the present moment. I have read affirmations people have sent me that are like paragraphs long. Of course, it's ridiculous. You're not going to memorize that. You're not going to write that down and do anything with it. There's information to repeat it, 40, 50 times. You're not going to do that with long. It has to be simple, simple, simple. Your mind needs to download it quickly and assimilate it. So I have only good experiences from now on. What more can you say about that? It's succinct and it's to the point. And this third affirmation, which I think will help generally, is I am grounded and balanced at all times. I am grounded and balanced at all times. When we are in a world where even the ground is unstable, where the weather is unstable, people are unstable, it's very hard to ground and balance. Sometimes you may live in a place where it's very difficult because there's such volatile energy under the ground, you can't ground and balance. So always keep yourself in brown when you say this affirmation, I'm grounded and balanced at all times. That is simple, will keep you balanced. You can do your T-bar, brown around it, and that's perfect. So the 3 are, I am now calm and peaceful at all times. I have only good experiences from now on, and I am grounded and balanced at all times. Say those 3, at least for the next month, until I see you again in the next podcast, and I'll have more positive affirmations for you that will help you get through these times, which are the end times, both programming-wise and spiritually-wise. So until next time, this is Stewart A. Swerdlow signing off for Expansions.com.